This is a project I've wanted to try for a long time, and when I found a set of rusty Japanese knives on eBay for 20 bucks, I knew it was the time. The challenge is to take otherwise unsalvageable knives and see if I can forge them into something useful, and boy did I find some doozies. Whether these are super old or recent production, these mamma jammas have been neglected. The amount of pitting here is extreme. These edges are in horrible shape. The handles are cracked, most have warps in them, and I fear what we're going to find when we look under the hood at their tangs. Now, there's a couple of major hurdles to overcome with a project like this. Number one, first and foremost, is whether or not there's enough material here. After I move all the unusable, corroded metal, is there enough usable metal left to forge weld into a billet that I can make into a blade? I'm also going to lose material during the forging and welding process itself. Number two, the forge welding. Do I have the skills to weld these thin, oddly shaped bits of steel together? And three, speaking of steel, it's a mystery as to what this is, so heat treating it correctly could be difficult and the performance of the final blade could really suffer. These handles appear to have production model numbers on them. I don't know what that means, but they're all cracked and stained. The tangs are so rusty that removing the handles requires the type of effort that ultimately damages all the handles.
Okay. It's the closest I've got, but you can see there's still just a split right there. So I don't know that I can salvage these handles. This is a bit that flaked off one of the tangs. It's very interesting. You can see the corrosion in the layers of the steel. Boy, it's really just falling apart.
A very unique site called Skullbliss.com sent me one of their skulls, which I'll unbox here in a second. Skullbliss.com offers hand-carved, one-of-a-kind skulls for home decor or wall art. They have longhorn, buffalo, ram, cow skulls, all artisan decorated in a variety of styles and techniques. Some of these are really sort of cool. They're perfect for maybe like an office or man cave, a ranch-themed room, or if you're like me, you know the best defense is a good offense. You put one in your bathroom to keep your spouse off guard. I've never seen anything like these, so I'm sort of excited to open this up and take a look, and man, mine's pretty intense. It was shipped in a nice wooden box with bubble wrap and arrived safe and sound. It fit together pretty easily, and it's pretty simple to hang on this metallic stand, or it comes with wall mounts. Skullbliss says using the link below will get you $50 store-wide credit that stacks on already discounted products valid through the date below. So check them out, guys. A wire wheel is just not going to get us there. We're going to have to clean these up on the grinder. Now this steel, as you can see, sparks okay, suggesting that there's some carbon content, but it's not sparking on the high side of things. So maybe there's some alloys in there, or maybe it's on the low side of high carbon steel. We'll try to harden it with a quench in a bit and see what happens.
So, you know, if I grind all this off, I'm not going to have any metal left because this pitting's pretty deep. So I'm just going to work with what I have and hope that I can consolidate all this, you know, cut it up and pile it on top of each other. See if I can compile, and I'll use this as a test knife. I'll see if I can compile all this steel together into a little square or billet, or, you know, get some material massed up here. I think the best way to do that is to cut it up and then to weld it together, forge weld it together.
This was the thickest knife and in better condition than the rest, so if I can't combine the steel in this one by forge welding it into a billet, then the others will be impossible. So I just really need to give this a go and make sure this project can actually go forward. I'm doing 2 forge side normalization cycles, then I'll quench a piece of it in this Parks 50, and we'll see if it gets hard and check on the grain size. So I forgot to film this part, but this is a picture of a future billet to demonstrate the process that you're going to see play out with our current one. We partially cut through our steel, then we clamp it in a vise and strike it here with a hammer to break it here. Then we examine that fractured surface for grain size. So here are the results on our current piece of steel. It just sort of bent over, no fracturing. And you can see that some of the welds pulled apart. Also, our grain size is still sort of big. We'll need to better normalize it next time. The hardness file actually puts this just shy of 60 HRC, maybe somewhere between 55 and 60, 57, 58, I guess. Now, I want a more solid piece of steel that doesn't pull apart. So maybe there's some alloys in here interfering with welds, or maybe I just stink at forge welding. But to get our welds to stick together better, I'm going to flatten this piece back out, put it in a canister, and press it at welding temperatures. We added powdered steel to the canister just to make sure there's as little oxygen there as possible. That's why we put paper in there too, to consume any oxygen that was in there. Remember, oxygen is bad for forge welds. Then we're going to soak the piece at 2100 degrees Fahrenheit in the forge for 20 minutes. A long soak at high temperatures should grow the grains of the individual steel pieces together at their boundaries, and everything should just mesh together better if I understand that process correctly. We're going to check it out. So here's our resultant piece. I've ground it flat. The dark edges are obviously our powdered 1095 steel that was added to the canister. We'll grind that away later. Next, we're going to do a little more normalizing, then a quench back into Parks 50. We're going to check hardness again, and it's going to come in again between 55 and 60 HRC. I'm starting to suspect that there are either some alloys at play here, or this steel is something like 1050 or 0.5% carbon, which maximally hardens to 58 HRC. It's an odd choice for a kitchen knife. Well, I mean, that grain size is a little better, but it's still not very good. Most importantly, though, the welds held together this time. There is a tear there, but it's perpendicular to our forge welds, which actually speaks to their strength at this point. So we figured out our forge welding process. That was our second issue, and we have some clues about heat treating, which was our third issue. We have to go back to our first issue, which is getting enough steel. So we're going to harvest the rest of our steel the best we can and see what type of knife we'll be able to forge out of all this. We're starting with the tangs because that's actually sort of the meatiest portion and the easiest to harvest. So we'll have a something to work with, something to start off on the right foot with. As for reclaiming steel from the blade portion, things get a little trickier. You can see how thin some of these blades are and how much pitting there is. Here are the pieces. I just barely got the rust off of them. As you can see, there's still a little bit of pitting on some of them, but I can't, this is what happens if you do too much grinding to get all the pitting off. You just sort of grind all the way through. We're just so desperate for material. I mean, that's not a lot, y'all.
Here's our test piece. It's got a little opening there and there. There. Otherwise, it looks pretty good. You know, if this, we can isolate this to the tang. I mean, it's fine. This came from the tangs, and you know, it looks pretty clean. I've only cleaned up one side because I'm hoping it's going on the outside. You know, it'll go like that or something. And then this is from our blades. There's a little, you know, defect there. This isn't usable anyway. Little defect there. This probably isn't really usable anyway. The other side looks pretty clean, so.
All right. That wasn't a lot of steel. So what about going back and scavenging more of the blade material? Here I've cut up as much as I can, and I've cleaned it up, and I'm stacking it. And those are just some high-risk welds, y'all. They're thin. We're not going to get a lot of usable steel out of there. It's just not worthwhile, unfortunately. So we'll just have to cut up what we have, tack weld it together, then forge weld it, and see what we end up with. So I didn't take a lot of good pictures here, but this is the billet that came out of all that. Remember what we had to do to get it rock solid with the welds last time? We're going to do it all again here. We're going to put it back in a canister with more powdered steel, some oxygen-eating paper, you know, and we're going to expose it to a lot of high heats for a very long time and grow those grains together. At least that's what I've heard the theory with all this is. And it worked the first time. There's no reason it shouldn't work this time. Well, all right, let's grind this away and see what's left. And wow, that is pretty thin, y'all. We do not have a lot of knife material to work with after all that. Oh my gosh. Here it is all cleaned up. We're going to weld a handle on it, and I've demarcated some lines here for the tang, and then the ricasso area, and then the blade, and we'll see. Maybe we'll get something that size out of it. Wish me luck. It's always surprising how much steel you lose to oxidation in forge scale, especially when you're forge welding and doing a lot of high temperature stuff. I remember also, you end up grinding off the tips of the forge welded material, the ends. They don't always weld up very well, so you end up losing that. And where we've, you know, attached the rebar, that area has to be ground away. So there's just lots of material loss. So we're going to normalize this 3 times. You know, we're going to start at 1550 in case it is like a 0.5% hypoeutectoid steel. And then we'll just go down to 1490 in case it is just an alloyed high carbon steel. And we'll just, you know, we'll just cover all our bases there. We should get decent normalization out of that. A little shy on our size goal. Let's get it quenched in the Sparks 50 from 1490 degrees Fahrenheit. And then we'll grind it and put a handle on it. The white wood here is holly. It's one of the naturally whitest woods available. Someone suggested it when I was looking for white handle material to substitute for ivory a few knives back. And here it is. I'm going to try it out. So I didn't want to stabilize it because my Cactus Juice stabilizer is a little bit yellow, but it probably should be stabilized. It's got this wide open grain that all kinds of dirt and everything gets into while you're sanding, and it's just smudge after smudge. So I finished the handle with gunstock wax. I'm wondering if CA glue might have been a good choice as well. So the cut test. To say this has a toothy edge is being generous, and I suspect the grain size here is still too large. Our first normalization cycle at 1550 is great. It's above the A3 line for something like 1050, but it's too low for something like 1040. And it makes me wonder if this steel is closer to 1040 than 1050 or 0.4% carbon, which is very low and a strange choice for a kitchen knife. It makes me wonder if these are cheap production knives. Our holly did have some blemishes in the middle. I think maybe some Starbond white CA glue would cover that up. I don't have any on hand though. Yeah, so it's a tiny knife, and the steel's not that good. All risks with this type of thing, but it's so much fun. I learned a whole lot. I'm glad you guys are here. Thanks for coming along. I'll see you next time.